Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving into something quite ancient, but surprisingly relevant.
Absolutely. We're looking at Psalm 78.
Right, penned by Asaph.
Yeah.
It's this, well, epic historical account, a real saga.
It really is. It shows God's incredible faithfulness.
Yeah, even when his people, well, they weren't so faithful
That's
back.
putting it mildly sometimes.
Our mission today really is to dig into this narrative, pull out the core insights, and see how this ancient text can genuinely strengthen your trust, your relationship with God today.
There are definitely some aha moments waiting in this psalm. It speaks across the centuries.
So Asaph kicks things off with this almost urgent plea, doesn't he? Verses 1 to 8. He's calling people to listen, to really hear these old stories, these traditions.
Yeah, and crucially, to pass them down.
Exactly, to tell their children and their children's children. Why is that intergenerational teaching, that deliberate remembering, so central here?
Well, it's fascinating because he frames it not just as history, but as a testimony. It's set up, he says, specifically so future generations don't make the same mistakes.
Ah, okay, so it's preventative.
Precisely. The goal, verse 7 says it clearly, is that they might set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments. It's about building trust, generation by generation, actively.
But, as you read through the psalm, it seems like that teaching, that passing down, it kind of failed repeatedly, didn't it?
That's a sharp observation, and it highlights something important.
What's that?
That just knowing the stories, the history, isn't enough. You can hear it, but if it doesn't change the heart, if it doesn't lead to actual trust.
Then the cycle just repeats itself.
Exactly. It shows the failure wasn't in God's actions, they were undeniable, but in the people's resistance to truly remembering in a way that shaped their choices. It's about internalization, not just recitation.
And the works Asaph lists, they are truly marvelous. Dividing the Red Sea.
Yeah, leading them with a cloud, with fire.
Getting water from a rock in the middle of nowhere.
And the food manna raining down, he calls it angel's food.
And quail. Birds like sand on the seashore. It sounds unbelievable.
It was 40 years of daily, undeniable miracles, constant provision.
Which makes their reaction even more stunning. They actually complain.
Right. After all that, they say, can God really spread a table in the wilderness? Can he give meat too? Verses 19 and 20.
Wow.
It's not just forgetfulness. It's profound ingratitude, a deep unbelief. That contrast is central to what Asaph is showing us.
That gap between God's power and their doubt. So despite seeing all this, they sinned yet more against him, as verse 17 says. What happened then? What were the consequences?
Oh, the consequences were definitely real, tangible. Asaph says their days were consumed in vanity, their years in trouble, emptiness, basically.
So a lack of real meaning or joy?
Exactly. And there were specific judgments, too. Fire, plagues, defeat in battle. It flowed from their choices.
But then there's this other side. God's compassion.
Yes, absolutely. Even when their hearts weren't right. Verse 37, and they were just saying the words. Verse 36.
Flattering him, yeah.
God, being full of compassion, forgave their iniquity and destroyed them not. He remembered they were just human, just flesh, as verse 39 puts it.
So this pattern keeps repeating. Rebellion, judgment, mercy.
Over and over. It shows this incredibly complex, consistent character of God, both righteous judgment and overwhelming mercy.
Even later, after Egypt, after the wilderness, when they finally get to the promised land, they still provoked him.
They did. Verse 56 says they tempted and provoked the Most High God. This time, it was mainly idolatry.
Right, the high places, the graven images in verse 58, direct disobedience.
And that led to perhaps the most shocking consequence.
Which was?
God allowed the Ark of the Covenant, the very symbol of his presence, to be captured by their enemies, a devastating blow. It seemed like maybe he had abandoned them.
But he hadn't, ultimately.
No. Even after all that, the psalm ends on a note of, divine choice and restoration. God chooses Judah, Mount Zion.
And David.
And David, his servant, to be their shepherd, someone who would lead with integrity of heart and skillfulness of hands. It shows God's ultimate purpose wasn't thwarted. His sovereignty shines through.
Okay, this history is intense. But now, here's where it gets really interesting for us, right? How does this ancient story, this cycle, speak to you today? How can it actually strengthen your trust?
Well, first off, it's the sheer power of remembering. Psalm 78 is shouting at us, really. Remember God's works.
Don't forget what he's done.
Exactly. When you face doubts, when things get tough in your own life, the psalm says, look back. Remember the answered prayers, the times he came through, the blessings.
Because forgetting opens the door to cynicism.
It really does. You start to think, maybe he's not there now. But remembering builds that foundation of trust. It reminds you of his track record, both in history and in your own experience.
So just like they were supposed to remember the Red Sea and the manna, we need to actively recall our own Red Sea moments, our own manna, maybe even write them down.
That's a great practice, and it extends beyond us as individuals, for families, for communities. The psalm stresses passing down that faith story, those values.
Like Israel was told to teach their children.
Yes. Parents, elders today, we have that same call to provide that moral, that spiritual grounding. In a world that often feels adrift, that anchor is vital. Societies can learn too, by looking honestly at past failures instead of repeating them.
The psalm also really emphasizes God's character through it all. His judgment is clearly real, we said that.
Naturally, there are consequences to rebellion.
But his mercy seems, well, relentless, always available.
And that brings up a challenging question for each of us, doesn't it? How often do we provoke or grieve God? Maybe not with idols of stone, but with our own unbelief, our stubbornness, our self-reliance.
Things we put before him.
Right. The psalm reminds us, yes, rebellion has consequences. But the bigger news, the crucial part, is that God's mercy, his desire to restore, is always there. It's this constant invitation, come back. His compassion endures. Knowing that must strengthen your relationship, right? Knowing you can return.
And what about David at the end, the shepherd king? What's the lesson there for us?
It speaks volumes about leadership, not just in church, but, at work, in your family, even just leading yourself.
How so?
True leadership, the kind God values, like David's, it's rooted in integrity, in compassion, in actual skill used wisely. It's not about ego or power.
It reflects a heart that's actually aligned with God.
Precisely, and that's a powerful model for all of us, how we influence others, how we conduct ourselves. It starts with getting our own hearts right.
So wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for you listening? Psalm 78 is this deep dive into human forgetfulness versus divine faithfulness. It's a warning for sure.
A warning not to neglect God's history, his work in the world, and in your life.
But it's also incredibly hopeful. A reminder of God's constant mercy, his guidance, his willingness to pick us up again. It calls us to remember, to tell the story, break those negative cycles, and live lives built on real faith and integrity.
Yeah, and strengthening that trust, that relationship, isn't about having a life free of problems. It's about actively remembering who God is. His power, his love, his constant offer of restoration, especially when we mess up. Our past experiences with him are fuel for our future faith.
So as you think about this journey through Psalm 78, here's something to consider. What specific works of God in your own life, big or small, will you make a point to remember this week? How will letting those memories sink in deepen your trust and your connection with him?